Prabhupada gives a nice purport. He says in the Bhagavad Gita, it is clearly stated that all intelligence comes from the Supreme Lord. What is that shloka? Yes. Matak smriti jnanam apohanam cha. All smriti is remembrance, to remember something. Jnanam, intelligence, and apohanam, forgetfulness. All these things come from the Lord, who is situated in everyone's heart as the Paramatma. Now the Paramatma, Supreme Lord, gave the Pandit the intelligence to understand that because he was too proud, that he could, for him to arrive at this understanding, Paramatma gave him the intelligence. Paramatma was pointing out that he's too proud of his learning, that he wanted to defeat the Supreme Lord. How proud he must be. Of course, he didn't know that this is the Supreme Lord. So, by the will of the Lord, and through the agency of Goddess Saraswati, he had been humbled, defeated. So one should not be too proud of one's position. See? This is the instruction. One should not be proud of one's position. If you're given a position by some authority or something, don't become proud. There's a saying in English, pride comes before a fall. This is Big Vijay. He got too proud. Even if one is a greatly learned scholar, if he commits an offense to the lotus feet of the Lord, he will not be able to speak properly. This is exactly what happened. Even though he's a big pundit, his intelligence was blocked, he was stunned, and he couldn't say anything because he committed offense. In spite of his great learning. So in every respect, we are controlled. Our only duty, therefore, is to surrender always to the lotus feet of the Lord and not become falsely proud. Mother Saraswati actually created this situation. To favor the champion Pandit so that he might surrender to Lord Chaitanya. She arranged it. Thinking like this, continuing translation, thinking like this, the Pandit said to Nimai, "My dear Nimai Pandit, please hear from me something. After hearing your explanations, I am simply struck with wonder. I am very surprised because you are not even a literary student." No, he said, yes, you are not even a literary student, and you do not have so much experience even in studying the Shastras. Nimai was teaching grammar. So he became respected as a pundit because of teaching grammar. He had opened a school at his home, and many students, young boys, would come. So the pundit is saying, you haven't even studied literature, or you don't have, you're so young, You don't have much experience in studying the Shastras, scriptures. So how have you been able to explain all these critical points on one of my verses? He's a very smart guy. Hearing this and understanding the Pandit's heart, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu replied in a humorous way. He's going to make light of it. He says, "My dear sir, I do not know what is a good composition and what is a bad composition. I do not know even. Whatever I have spoken must be understood to have been spoken by Mother Saraswati." He knows this guy is a devotee of Saraswati. So when the Pandit heard this assessment by Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the Pandit sorrowfully, he became sad. He wondered, why did Mother Saraswati wanted to defeat him through a small boy? He's thinking like this. And the Pandit said, "I shall go home and offer some prayers and meditation to the goddess of learning. And I will ask her why she has insulted me so greatly through this boy." Which means he's coming to the right conclusion. Saraswati, Mother Saraswati, had in fact induced the champion to compose his verses in an impure way. She caused it. And furthermore, when it was discussed, she covered his intelligence. And so the Lord's intelligence was triumphant. Jai! He is victorious. When this poetic champion was thus defeated, all of the Lord's disciples who were sitting there, they witnessed it. Boys, they all witnessed how the Lord demolished this big champion. They began to laugh. Well, that must have hurt him even more. All these young boys laughing at him. But Chaitanya Mahaprabhu stopped his students and he asked them, "Don't do that. Don't laugh. Because his pride is already shredded. Now you're throwing salt on his wounds by laughing. You see? It's not a good thing." And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is telling his students, don't laugh at it. And then Mahaprabhu begins to address the poet, the Pandit, as follows. He said, "My dear sir, you are the most learned scholar. You are the topmost of all great poets. Otherwise, how could such fine poetry come from your mouth?" So he's praising him now. Your poetic skills, Jai, Shri Radha Parashishwar, Jagannath, Baladev Subhadra, and Sridhari Sachisuta. Mahaprabhu continues. Your poetic skills is like the constant flow of the Ganges. One wave after another all the time. That's what Mahaprabhu compares his poetry skills. fact, I can find no one in this world who can compete with you. After humbling him, Mahaprabhu was praising him. Even in the poetic composition of such great poets as Bhavabhuti, Jayadev Goswami, and Kalidas, even in their poetry there are some faults. What does Krishna say in the Gita? Every endeavor is covered by some faults. So Mahaprabhu is, don't be too upset. Such mistakes should be considered negligible. One should see only how such poets have displayed their poetic power. Don't focus on their mistakes. See what a great poet he is. There's so many nice purports. I want to read them all. This is a nice one here. Prabhupada cites Bhagavatam. Bhagavatam, first canto. Tadvad vishargo janataga viplavo yasmin pratishlokam abhadyavatyapi namanyanantasya yasankitani yat shrinvanti gayanti grinanti sadhava. This is Narad Muni. Narad Muni is here with us. He's speaking to Vyas, his disciple Vyasdev. So, Prabhupada purport, he quotes this verse and then he says, in explaining the glories of the Lord, some inexperienced men may compose poetry with many faults, but because it contains glorification of the Lord, great personalities may read it and hear it and chant it. Despite its minute literary discrepancies, one must study poetry on the merit of its subject matter. According to Vaishnava philosophy, any literature that glorifies the Lord, whether it is properly written or not, is considered first class. There need not be any further discussion or consideration. The poetic compositions of Bhavabhuti or Srikanta, which includes Malati Madhava, Uttaru Charita, Veera Charita, and so many similar Sanskrit dramas. These are poets who came before. Like Jayadev Goswami was a few hundred years before Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. We sing Tavakara Kamala Bale Nakama Bhuta Shringa from his Gita Govinda. He glorified the 10 incarnations so wonderfully. Jayadev Goswami. So, this great poet, Digvijay, Keshav Kashmiri, he was born during the time of Bhoja Raja, who was the son of Nilakantha. Nilakantha was a Brahmin. Kalidas, another poet, he flourished during the time of Maharaj Vikramaditya, and he became the state poet. He composed some 30 or 40 Sanskrit dramas. You see the kind of intelligence these men had. He composed 30 or 40 Sanskrit dramas, including Kumara Sambhav, Abhigyana Shakuntala, and Megha Dutta. His drama, Raghuvamsha, is especially famous throughout India. It's about Lord Ram. So we have already described Jayadev Goswami. We've spoken about him in the 13th chapter of Agnideva. Prabhu didn't bother to say much this time. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu continues. He's glorifying the poet. I am not even fit to become your disciple. Mahaprabhu's humility. I am not even fit to be your disciple. Therefore, kindly don't take offense. Don't take seriously what I have said. It is just my childish impudence. Now please go back home. Tomorrow you can come again and we will meet and we'll discuss, so that I can hear some of your discourses on the Shastras. Mahaprabhu has given him an opportunity to meet again, and this time he wants to hear him talk about scripture. In this way, both the poet and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu went back to their homes, and at night, that poet worshipped Mother Saraswati. She was his deity. In a dream, means while he was sleeping, the goddess appeared and informed him of the Lord's position. And the poetic champion could understand from that dream that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. What was it in another book, Chaitanya Bhagavat, I think. This has been described in the Goddess Saraswati, because when he was offering prayers, he was saying to her, why did you forsake me? You abandoned me, and I got defeated by a little boy. Why? And in the dream, she said to him, that boy is my prabhu. He is Mahaprabhu. So the next morning, the poet came to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and surrendered at his lotus feet. The Lord bestowed his mercy on him, and he even cut off all his bondage to material attachments. Prabhupada says, this same process was advocated by Lord Sri Krishna in Bhagavad Gita. He says, surrender unto me in all instances. Sarvadhamam pratyajamamekam sharanam. In all instances, you should surrender to me. And this was advocated by Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So the champion surrendered unto the Lord, and the Lord favored him. One who is favored by the Lord is freed from material bondage. This is what it means to get the favor of the Lord. People think to get the favor of the Lord is to get riches and so many things. No. But to get the favor is you become free from bondage, free from attachment. This reminds me of a verse in Bhagavatam. Prabhupada said that his business, Prabhupada was speaking one day and he said he had good scope for becoming very wealthy. He had his pharmaceutical business and everyone said, oh, even an astrologer said, you could become as rich as the Bulas. They were like billionaires of India, family. He said, so his business was going good and then suddenly it crashed. It happens. So Prabhupada was wondering, why this happened to me? Why did Krishna allow this to happen to me? So what did Prabhupada do? He went to the scriptures. He went to Srimad Bhagavatam and he found one verse. And he studied this verse. Tattenu kampa susamikshamano. And he was amazed when he read it, studied this verse. Krishna is saying, when I especially favor one of my devotees, I especially favor him, but he has some little attachment, then my first business is my first installment of mercy on him is to take away everything. Make it everything. And then he has no other course but to surrender to me, fully, completely. So Prabhupada was amazed. And he began to think, is that what happened to me? So he went to, who did he go to? He went to one of his godbrothers, friend. He said, I was reading Bhagavatam and I was thinking, I was looking for some answers. Why did this happen to me? Why did, my business was going so good. So he asked his godbrother, he said, do you think this verse in Bhagavatam applies to me? And his godbrother said, definitely. Definitely. Krishna has favored you. So Prabhupada wasn't lamenting. This is how a devotee thinks, a real devotee thinks. Some reverse comes. Krishna must want to teach me something. So therefore here he says, one who is favored by the Lord is freed from material bondage. And Prabhupada quotes another verse from Bhagavad Gita, Tyaktva deham punar janma naiti mam eti swarjuna. He will come to me, come back home. For sure. So continuing the translation, the champion, the poetic champion, was certainly most fortunate. His life was successful by dint of his vast learning. and his erudite scholarship, and thus he attained the shelter of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Here comes another wonderful Bhaktivedanta purport. Prabhupada's commented. Sri Narottam Das Thakur has sung that the best qualification for taking shelter of the lotus feet of Lord Chaitanya is to be the most fallen. Prabhupada says it. The best qualification for taking shelter of the lotus feet of Lord Chaitanya is to be the most fallen. Narottam Das Thakur has sung. Patita pavana hintu tava avatar, mo shamo patita prabhu nato ibeyar. He said, you are known as Patita Pavan. You've come to save the most fallen. Well, don't look any further. I am the most fallen. So my claim is first. The Lord Chaitanya came specifically to deliver the fallen souls. Fallen meat eaters, drunkards, woman hunters, gamblers. He's come for them. Such persons are never considered to be learned scholars, right? And even if they pose themselves as such, we don't think that they're learned. Because such so-called scholars, they superficially see that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu associates with fallen souls. And therefore they think that, oh, he's just meant for low-class people. Some people think like that about Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. The so-called Brahmins during the time of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, they criticized him, they rejected him. They said, he's only hanging out with these low-class people. And what's that fellow? Haridas Thakur. He's a Muslim. But this is all they could see, They can only see faults. There's no fault. They just don't understand that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is Patita Pavan. And the fact that he is delivering the most fallen, this is a wonderful characteristic. We are all here because of that. Nityananda Prabhu delivered Jagai and Madai. And the servant of Nityananda Prabhu, Srila Prabhupada, he delivered thousands of Jagais and Madais. So there's foolish people that think we don't need to hear about Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Therefore, such scholars, so-called scholars, do not take to the Krishna consciousness movement. To be puffed up with false learning, it actually is a disqualification for accepting Krishna consciousness movement. But here is a special example. Although this poetic champion was a greatly learned scholar, the Lord favored him because of his humble submission. he was intelligent enough to realize Srila Vrindavan, then continuing translation, Srila Vrindavan Das Thakur, who wrote Caitanya Bhagavat, he has described all these incidents very elaborately. And I have only presented the specific incidents that he has not described. These nectarian drops of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's pastimes can satisfy the senses of everyone who hears them. What a wonderful literature. Praying at the lotus feet of Sri Rupa and Sri Raghunath, and always desiring their mercy, I, Krishnadas, narrate Sri Chaitanya Caritamrita, following in their footsteps. So that's the end of chapter 16. In chapter 17, we still have a little time. There's a summary of this chapter. This 17th chapter, as summarized by Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur in his Amrita Pravaha Bhashya, describes Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's pastimes from his 16th year until the time he took sannyas. So this is what we're approaching now. From 16 years to the time he took sannyas, he was 24. Srila Vrindavan Das Thakur has already vividly described these pastimes in his book Caitanya Bhagavat. Therefore, Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami is only describing them briefly. That's what Bhaktivinoda Thakur says. Vivid descriptions of some pastimes, some portions of his pastimes, will be seen in this chapter. However, because Vrindavan Das Thakur has not elaborately described them, therefore Kaviraj Goswami, he will elaborate on it. I mean, really, the pastimes of the Lord are unlimited. To take the time to, and somewhere else, Kaviraj Goswami said, if I were to describe all, the book would be 100 volumes. So much. But since Vrindavan Das Thakur has already done the Caitanya Bhagavat, and that came out before. That came out before Krishnadas Kaviraj began to write this book. So, in this chapter we shall find the descriptions of the mango distribution festival. Sounds good. And also we will find Lord Chaitanya's discourses with the Chand Kazi, the Muslim ruler from the Navadvip area. And finally, this chapter will show that the same son of Mother Yashoda, Lord Krishna, tasted 4 transcendental mellows of devotional service in his form of Sachidananda. He tasted 4 rasas. He came to teach about those and to relish them himself. What are those 4? Dasya, Sakya, Vatsala, and Madhurya. The only other rasa that he didn't was the Shantaras. Sometimes people, even devotees, inexperienced devotees, like that, they say, oh, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu only came to teach Madhurya rasa. But that is not the case. That is not fact. No, he says so himself in this book. Came to teach and taste 4 rasas. To show that, because Prabhupada commented on this, that all these 4 rasas, they are equal in the spiritual world. In any one of them, the cowherd boys and Sakya, they're completely satisfied, happy. The servant, to be Krishna's servant, completely satisfied. And then what is big Vatsalya, the elderly, like Mother Yashoda and the Maharaj, the other elderly people of the Braj, completely satisfied. They don't want to change their rasa. They're not all saying, if only I could be a gopi. They don't think like that. Maybe someone may bring a mundane conception into this and think, oh, only Madhurya is. But that's not the fact. Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami explains, according to Tattva, they're equal. But according to Rasa, then Madhurya is the best. But it takes time to explain all the rasas, how wonderful they are. And why did Chaitanya Mahaprabhu come to show us? There's opportunities for everyone to serve him in this way or that way or that way or that way. As they say, variety is the sometimes it says variety is the spice of life, or variety is the mother of invention. So, spiritual world, we sing this morning. Yashomati Nandana. Right? Such a nice song. And Jai Radhe, Jai Krishna, Jai Vrindavan. That song glorifies all the inhabitants of Vrindavan. Srinanda Jasoda Jayo, Jayo Gopagan, Sri Damadi, Jaya Denuvatsagan. These pastimes are full of sweet nectar. Each name of Krishna, each word is full. So, to understand Srimati Radharani's ecstatic love for him, Lord Krishna assumed the form of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And the attitude of Srimati Radharani is considered to be the super excellent devotional mentality. As Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Krishna himself assumed the position of Srimati Radharani. In his Shikshastika prayers, in the last verse, it is Radharani who is speaking. Aslisha Vapadaradam Pranashtamam Adarshana Marmahatam Karotava Yata Tata Vaham Vidadatu Lampatu Matpranana Tastu Sevana Pra. Study that verse, you see. It is Radharani speaking. said, Krishna, you may handle me roughly by your embrace. You may make me broken-hearted by not being present before me. You can do anything you like, but you are still my worshipful Lord, unconditionally. This is Radharani's mentality. So as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Krishna himself, he assumed the position of Srimati Radharani to taste her ecstatic situation. No one else could do that. We shouldn't even attempt. When Sri Krishna assumed the form of the four-handed Narayan, the gopis showed their respect to him, but they were not interested in Narayan. Yeah, Arjuna, after seeing the universal form, the Virata Roop, and in the four-handed form, Arjuna asked Krishna, please go back to the two-handed form. So gopis, as mentioned in Bhagavatam and Krishna book, they were looking for Krishna, searching for Krishna. And Krishna, in the forest, he assumed this four-handed form as Narayan. And then the Prabhu said they just offered him respect. Said, have you seen Krishna? The son of Nanda Maharaj passed by this way. That's their only concern. Look at how elevated devotees they are that they could come and get to see Narayan and just not interested. That tells you how elevated devotees they were. They were not interested in Narayan. In the ecstatic love of the gopis, all worshipable forms except Krishna are rejected. He says it in another way. In their love, all other forms, they're rejected. They have no interest in them. Amongst all the gopis, Srimati Radharani has the highest ecstatic love. In fact, when Krishna in his form of Narayan saw Radharani, he could not maintain that form. Yeah, he could not keep his position as Narayan. So again, he assumed the form of Krishna. And the king of Brajabhumi, who is Nanda Maharaj, and the same person in Navadvip is Jagannath Mishra, the father of Lord Chaitanya, not different from Nanda Baba. Similarly, Mother Yashoda, who is the queen of Vrindavan, Brajabhumi, in the pastimes of Lord Chaitanya, she is Sachi Mata. Therefore, the son of Sachi is the son of Yashoda. And Sri Nityananda occupies an ecstatic position of parental love in servitude and fraternal attraction. So Nityananda Prabhu is tasting three rasas. He occupies an ecstatic position of parental love. He's the older brother. So he looks out for Krishna. he acts as his servant. And he has brotherly love, Sakira. Then Sri Advaita Prabhu, he exhibits the ecstasy of both fraternity and servitude. Advaita Panchatattva is a combination of servitude and fraternity. All the Lord's other associates who are situated in their original love engage in the service of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. They all have their position, their rasa. And they come and taste it with Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. There's a book called, it's by Kavi Karnapur. Prabhupada will refer to it constantly throughout his purports of Chaitanya Charitamrita. Kavi Karnapur wrote this book. He's one of Mahaprabhu's associates. And he wrote this book telling you who is who. Who is who? Yes, Gaura Ganadesh Deepika tells you who these associates of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu are in Krishna lila. It's wonderful. So, the same absolute truth who enjoys as Krishna or Shyam Sundara, who plays his flute and dances with the gopis, sometimes takes birth in a Brahmin family and plays the part of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and accepting the renounced order of life. So it appears contradictory that the same Krishna accepted the ecstasy of the gopis, and of course, this is very difficult for ordinary persons to understand. But if we accept the inconceivable energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, then we can understand that everything is possible. There is no need of mundane arguments in this connection, because mundane arguments are meaningless in regard to the inconceivable potency of the Lord. At the end of this chapter, Srila Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, following in the footsteps of Srila Vyasadeva, has summarized all the Adi Lila pastimes separately. So, shall stop there. That was just the summary of the chapter. Next week we'll begin. Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.